People's Platform.
A very good evening. You're watching the People's Platform here on TV1, and tonight our guest is Nadishani Perera, the Executive Director of Transparency International Sri Lanka. A very good evening, Nadishani, and welcome to the People's Platform.
Good evening, Naveksha.
It's a pleasure to have you on our show. To start off, Nadishani, now Transparency International has always been in the forefront on fighting corruption. And let's start off by how exactly does corruption happen in Sri Lanka? And where are we with regards to the fight against corruption? Are we progressing?
Yes, it's a broad question. Let me start by reminding about what we mean by corruption, because we often tend to narrow it down to somebody taking a bribe, under the table sort of exchange to provide a public service. However, it is broader than that. The universally accepted definition of corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. Now, we entrust power, people entrust power to the people who govern us. When we elect people, we entrust power to them, our sovereign power, our rights to them to take decisions regarding public resources that will have a critical impact on our present time, on our future generation. How do you use public money? What decisions about public resources? What decisions about the economy? So this power is given just for one purpose, that is to use it for the best interest of the nation, for the best interest of the people. Now, if such person with entrusted power use it for a personal gain, then that is actually corruption. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you got some money out of it. For example, if you have an institution that you are responsible for, we know that all the parliament, then you have a cabinet, then all the public institutions come under the different cabinet ministries. Now, if you are entrusted with this and you don't take steps to recruit the right talent, the right resources. This country doesn't lack experts, right? Our experts have been headhunted by other countries. But if we don't set our organization in the right place, have the correct tone from the top, set a strong anti-corruption policy, and set the procedures and ensure that the service you're supposed to give to the people is not happening, then you have actually not done your part. Instead, why can't we get the experts? Often because we instead got our friends, our cronies, our relatives,
political appointments.
Exactly, and this is almost like an accepted cultural thing. And then we say things like, oh, we don't have resources, we don't have expertise, and people are struggling to get basic services. This is not an excuse. I mean, this is a very high level of corruption I'm talking about, because people are very acutely aware about what we call petty corruption that they face day to day when they try to access a particular permit, a particular service, when the official instead say you need to give me something to get this. That is called petty corruption. But then there is what we call grand corruption. That is when parties collude. So when I say parties, there's often a high level politician involved, a high level public official. Without these two coming together, you can't do. Then there's often a big company involved. It's about big decisions like, okay, you want to build a big bridge, a highway.
Where is the tender going?
Where is the tender going? Now, you're talking about, sometimes this money is a loan, in fact. Generations are going to pay. Now, you're supposed to then go for the lowest bid that gives the highest quality. But what if you compromise that because you give it to the person who's giving you the biggest cut? Who suffers? The money that could have been saved and used for health, for education, for water, for access roads, which some areas in our country still do not have, instead are going into the pocket, and we are paying exorbitant amount to maybe build a stretch of a road which we could have got a better quality and a cheaper price. So this is the level of corruption, and people know that this situation has not really changed from people. And if you look at another way, it can be seen as law enforcement. Now, in a country when there is no corruption, people know whatever level you are in society, that you can get justice. But if justice depends on, your connections or your ability to pay certain parties off, whether you get arrested or not depends on how much money you give the law enforcement, then this is serious corruption. And imagine the implications. You might lose your freedom of movement. You might be mentally tortured, because spending a day inside the remand prison itself is bad enough. And so corruption affects every part of life, accessing basic rights like health, education, to why the development does not go into the area. We've been getting development aid since independence. World Bank, ADB, this is our 17th IMF program. Now we need to ask the question, those institutions also need to ask the question, why do we keep coming back? What is the problem? Why the development outcomes are not being felt by the areas and the people who really need to feel it? It's leaking out. You can't keep pouring water to a vessel with lot of holes. It's called waste, fraud, corruption. These are the areas. So if you need to fix it, and I would like to add, now the Supreme Court in its landmark decision towards last year end held the former president, prime minister, the central bank governor, monetary board accountable for the economic crisis. Now, it's a very high level accountability. In fact, what it said was that you violated the public trust doctrine, the public trust that was entrusted with your role. You were supposed to administer the economy properly, but the series of decisions that you took, disregarding sound independent economic advice, led to the foreign reserves hitting a zero, actual bankruptcy, and us having to declare bankruptcy, and the suffering of the people after that. I don't have to tell you now, actually, right? And it continues. And also some people actually lost lives staying in queues and things like that. So in a way, so what Supreme Court identified was a very high level of accountability. And that is very important, because something tied up with corruption is that even anyone, even children might say, you can get away robbing a nation, robbing a central bank, but if you rob a coconut, you might have a problem. And people know, in normal conversation, we know people who are implicated in massive scams in the nation, but how many of those people have been brought to justice? So in a sense, but the Supreme Court, exercising its fundamental rights jurisdiction, set a very good example by saying that the higher power you get, the higher responsibility and accountability. You can't say, I don't know. You can't say, that one
I was not aware.
I was not aware, because you are responsible. You take that role with that responsibility. So I think that is a very good start for all public officials to realize that, you should not succumb to political pressure and engage in corruption. You should follow the process, because one day you might be held answerable. Then you have to answer. And it is a good message to politicians. And also, it is an eye-opener for people when they elect people. We can discuss more about that.
Definitely. I'd like to ask you now, since you spoke about the economy and what Sri Lanka is currently facing right now due to bad decision making, where does corruption play a role with regards to human rights, law, economy, and so on? How does corruption play a role in each and every aspect of life?
And I'm so glad that you're asking this question, because this connection needs to be made. And to some extent, as TISL, we've been working for over 20 years, and we've been trying to show people and show other civil society organizations working on human rights, say governance, law, that this is connected. Corruption is so connected to all this. If I may tell you, democracy. Now, democracy is the people's ability, to freedom of expression, to elect the people they want, to hold them accountable, to dissent, to right to information, to protest. Now, when there is corruption, a common thing, if you look at countries around the world where the leadership, the governments are corrupt, they will ensure that democracy cannot function properly. Because if people can ask questions, people have access to information, if people have free and fair elections, then people will hold these people to account, right? Hold the governments to account. So it is like it's a package. In order for high-level corruption to succeed, they have to ensure that the media does not, cannot do their job fearlessly. You send a chilling effect. You arrest a couple of people. You go to the extent of even killing people.
That's
right?
how suppression starts.
Suppression starts. You use violence against peaceful protesters. So people are scared now, right? I mean, nobody wants to get arrested, beaten up. Media institutions are scared. So then nobody's going to ask questions from you, right? So this is democracy is very directly connected. Human rights. I mean, if you look at if you look at civil and political rights, is what I mentioned: freedom of expression, right to question, right to protest. All of these rights are part and parcel of a democracy. These rights are directly trampled upon by corrupt actors. In fact, the worst is they will try to legally do that, like what we were seeing in this country by bringing in the Online Safety Act, by trying to bring this Anti-Terrorism Act. So you're legally trapped then. And then if you look at the social, cultural rights, the right to education, right to health, right to a good family life, housing, a decent job. Now these things you lose when, like I explained, when the services don't flow to the needy area, because people are stealing. So what you get is low quality. You're supposed to be having free education, but you don't have a principal in the school, or you don't have water in the school, you don't have desks. There is a problem, right? Health, like we can, and what about the medicines that came to us that were not even medicines, then later on we get to see. So these are our direct rights. So you can't, if we talk about environment, again, the big place where you lose the sanity of environment is because because somebody is paying for you to somebody is taking money and allowing a harmful project without a proper environmental impact assessment, not talking to the parties in that area, that should be consulted. So like the Umayo project, people are still suffering, right? And who wanted this project? Why the environmental assessment haven't happened? All the human rights are directly connected. And then economy. Now, I'm happy to say that even the United Nations Human Rights Council last year, when speaking about Sri Lanka, highlighted the fact of economic crimes. Now, in fact, our government did object at that point, saying, that's not your subject. Your subject is human rights. They were like, economic crimes are human rights violations, because when you destroy the economy in such a way that
the citizens are deprived
you
of
can't access
the basic
rights. You can't detach economy with the other rights. Economy enables us, gives us that enabling environment to access our rights. So if you work in such a way that you destroy the economy due to corrupt intentions, then you're not upholding the public trust that has been put on you, then that is an economic crime, and there is a direct relation. And in fact, the International Monetary Fund, now these institutions have been relatively historically hesitant to go into governance, civic space, and corruption, but more and more, if you look at the last spring meetings of the IMF and World Bank last week, this conversation has come to the forefront, that countries that has been continuously, repeatedly going to the IMF have something in common. What do you think it is? Corruption and weak governance. So these countries, the civil society and the citizens are telling these institutions, look at this, if we don't fix governance, we'll keep coming back to you. You're not supposed to give aid that is not sustainably used. So in fact, that is why the IMF did its first ever governance diagnostic in Asia for Sri Lanka. And they produced this very strong report, one of the strongest governance diagnostic, where they said all these anti-corruption governance system change reforms are essential, they are macro-critical. That means they affect the economy. They affect these economic numbers that we are asking you to achieve. So in order for you to achieve the economic reform agenda in our agreement, you need to fix the governance and corruption problems. That was clearly said.
Definitely. We have a lot to talk about system change, but we'll have to cross over to a short commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. This is the People's Platform on TV1.
The People's Platform. TV1. TV for life.
Supreme Court issues order preventing the appointment or nomination of Supreme Court justices. Political parties prepare to celebrate May Day. 14 celebrations in Colombo. Eric Solheim commends the President. Parliamentarians and ministers rally for tax-free vehicle imports. High Court acquits parliamentarian Mahindananda in bribery case.
TV1. TV for life. The People's Platform.
Welcome back. You're watching the People's Platform on TV1, and we are in discussion with Nadishani Perera, the Executive Director of Transparency International, Sri Lanka. Nadishani, just before we crossed over to the short commercial break, you were speaking about system change. Now, system change was a word that we heard over and over again during the period of the Aragalaya. Now, has this system change been achieved post-Aragalaya, or do we see somewhat of progress in terms of this system change?
I would say we cannot be satisfied with this, with the very, very little, I would say, okay, steps towards the right direction of the systems change that are taking place simply because of the pressure from the IMF, because it's part of the IMF agreement condition. So whatever that they have included as essential criteria in order for you to get the next tranche of money, the government has now started one by one trying to accomplish. However, there are problems and the progress is very slow. And just think now, Aksha, now these days you hear political parties talking a lot about what they will do if they get elected. And in general, the leadership of this country, wherever they go, they talk about, you know, we're turning the country around. But how are they able to give concrete examples of the anti-corruption work they have done? For all the examples I gave you of how corruption happens in Sri Lanka, what have you done to minimize it? It doesn't come. And even in your promises, are you even having a plan to do it? So, for example, it is essential that transparency is infused into the governance at all levels. That means you have to first of all share information with people.
We have some of the parliamentarians who haven't even done their asset declaration, unfortunately.
Exactly. And now it is mandatory not only for them to submit the asset declaration, that has always been mandatory, but now it should become public knowledge. Again, the new Anti-Corruption Act came as a result of this IMF agreement, we would say. Now it is a good law. I mean, it is compared to what we had. But, you know, Sri Lanka didn't necessarily lack laws. Sri Lanka was very poor in implementation. In fact, we take pride in coming up with laws and in national action plans. We have very classy national action plan launch events. And then after that, nobody knows what happens. Or and also we are very good at coming up with institutions to implement certain changes. Commission to look into that, committee to look into this, all these institutions, people are funding, okay? People are having to pay another couple of people's salaries. And the issue is that then when the institution comes, you'll have to look at the composition. How the people are appointed. Are they given the independence they need to do their job? You can take away independence directly. You can directly threaten them and harass them. But you also can do it indirectly by creating a chilling effect in the country. We saw the Public Utilities Commission chairperson was removed in Parliament. Now it's not about personally whether you like him or not. It's about what was the reason. Was he doing anything in violating his role to talk about for the people, the consumers? Or no, is it because he challenged the minister? The previous election commissioners, they objected to the local government election being postponed unlawfully. It is against the Supreme Court judgment as well. However, they did complain that they were targeted, their social media accounts were targeted, they were given a very hard time. So, the people are watching, these commissioners are watching. They are normal people like us. Sometimes there are statements made by those in very high positions in this country, just before, say, a judgment is due. Something like, this is not something for the court to look at. What are you trying to do? You're trying to intimidate. So you create this chilling effect. So that's what I'm saying, that we created the Anti-Corruption Act. Now are we giving the space that the new commissioners have been appointed? Okay, through the Constitutional Council. Now, do they have the space that they need to do their job properly? There are issues about what's going on there, and people have lost trust anyway in the institution. The Aragalia is a manifestation of that. Now, it is very important for institutions to get their house in order, but also to show to people that they are doing something in the right direction and win their trust. So, prosecute somebody for once, a big player, a big fish. Instead of catching this guy who took like 2,000 rupees or something, what about the guy who took like 2 million, 200 million? The rate of convictions are so low, the prosecutions are so low. So in terms of, for example, our public procurement in any country is an area which is highly vulnerable to corruption. You're talking about procuring goods and services for the government. So we don't have a proper legal system for that. We have national guidelines that are not uniformly followed. Now, this is part of the IMF agreement. They're supposed to start setting that in order. We are yet to see. A lot of the governance reforms are being delayed.
Are you satisfied with the current measures taken to fight against anti-corruption in Sri Lanka? Is it up to any level of satisfaction?
That is what, I cannot be satisfied at the moment, because you don't necessarily see the political will. It's almost like when they are pressured to do something, they do something. Even when these pieces of legislation came, now they rushed through the election expenditure law last year, January. It was part of the IMF. There was no time to review it. I mean, why should you rush such a, first time legislation for the country? And now, they are not really supporting, resourcing the Election Commission to implement that. Now the Anti-Corruption Act is there, but what are the next steps? They're supposed to set up a digital system of asset declaration that you're talking about, and so that anyone can see these asset declarations also, but it's going at a snail pace. And now finally, we saw that they have put out this very critical piece of legislation that was part of the Aragalaya conversation. It is the law to recover our stolen assets. Now, did you know, do people know that they have actually put this out, a basic legal framework? If you actually do come up with a genuine piece of legislation, you should get all people, the necessary stakeholders in a party to that, consult them, get their views. Now we are now trying to take it, and we got it, and we are trying to put it on our website and do some public communication so that people know this is there.
The awareness has to be done.
And exactly, and it's about under-resourcing institutions that should be prioritized. See, our budget should not be still focusing on the military, but instead anti-corruption agencies, the law enforcement agencies. We need more courts, we need more resources to the Attorney General's Department, the Bribery Commission, the Witness Victim Protection Authority, but that's, you can see that it's not a priority, but it's like, are you just ticking the box? And the tone from the top. Every agency need to have its own anti-corruption policy in place and a whistleblowing procedure. And the top people need to demonstrate that they are serious about corruption and that they have zero tolerance. But we actually have a very negative example often from the top. Then you can't expect the people below for those institutions to be transformed.
Yes, we're almost coming to the end of tonight's program. So before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you a very important question, Nadishani. We're in a journey leading up to an election, and that is when the people will be really empowered to cast their vote, and that is when the people have to play their role right. What is your advice to those who are watching us? How must we sort of participate and support this fight against corruption? How can we hold these politicians accountable with regards to corruption?
Yes, at the end of the day, we still have a basic democratic framework, so we get to elect our representatives. So there is no excuse for us to tolerate corruption, knowingly elect people who don't have a good track record, who don't have integrity, who have not demonstrated that they have integrity, no criminal record, and also you need to see whether the person has actually done something to serve the people.
Don't you think the people should sort of transform or go away from that typical culture in Sri Lanka where you vote for the butt packet or the job for your kids or the housing loan that you will be given a low interest rate for?
Exactly.
So how should we be smart voters this time?
Exactly, because I think the Sri Lankans learned their lesson very well. In fact, the Aragalaya people were saying, we learnt it. We want a system change. Now, the system change is not going to fall from the sky. One very concrete place where we initiate system change is by electing the right people. For that, we who are voting need to look at the right criteria. So, a clean track record and question the manifesto, question what is the action plan they have for the system change. Ask the right question. Like you say, it's not about what you do to my community, what are you going to do to my family. It's about what are you going to do to fight corruption. What are you doing right now? Because, people can give false promises, but they need to walk the talk. Because right now, those in government have all the power to do the changes. There are institutions who will support you if you are doing anti-corruption and proper governance reforms. The opposition has a role to play. Are they doing that? So people need to ask the right question, because politicians often say, it's when like the people are their customers.
Yes, and when I come to power, this is what I will do.
Yeah, and also they say, and in fact, when we tell the political parties, don't give nominations to known corrupt individuals who have a bad track record, who have never served the community. They are like, we put winning horses. I know it sounds bad, but what they are saying is who can get the vote. So then the voters have a role to say, this time around, we are going to make a change, at least for our future generation. This time is critical. It's a good time to make a change in the country, because there is pressure on who comes into power, and pressure on the people right now to make these changes because of the dependency on the IMF, World Bank, ADB. They are asking for these changes, and people are now woken up. So this is the time to get as much as possible system reform, make the public sector independent, ask for independent prosecution office, ask for independent debt management office. We can go into these details, we can support in the civic education, but you need to start thinking differently. You can't say, I've always been this party, or I am voting for my religion, or I am voting for my person from my school or from my caliber, but the right criteria, if you care about the country. And also, it will come back and bite us. We realize that you can't ignore politics, because politics does not ignore you.
Definitely. Thank you very much for those candid views, Nadishani. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and I hope our viewers will be voting smart at this upcoming election. Thank you so very much for joining us again once more. And that's a wrap of the People's Platform for tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.